Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, economic uncertainty. There's no other word for it. President Trump's new global tariffs are set to hit tomorrow. U.S. and world economies are bracing for the impact. Markets don't know whether to buy or sell because details from the White House very hard to come by. One thing is for certain. Americans are likely to see higher prices. It's not a sprint. It is a Senate marathon. Senator Cory Booker is still on the Senate floor, entering hour 22 of a protest set of remarks against President Trump's policies. Booker has been reading letters from people who say they have been hurt by changes that have taken place since the president resumed control of the White House.
In just 71 days, the President of the United States has inflicted so much harm on Americans' safety, financial stability, the core foundations of our democracy, and even our aspirations as a people from our highest offices, a sense of common decency. These are not normal times in America.
Also tonight, Trump's first election test in Florida. Voters in 2 congressional districts are heading to the polls as Republicans are looking to increase their very thin House majority as candidates vie for the seats vacated by Republican Congressmen Matt Gaetz and Mike Waltz. In Wisconsin, a statewide vote with very large national implications is for a seat on the state Supreme Court. It has become the most expensive judicial contest in history, and billionaire Elon Musk has been heavily and visibly involved. Let's bring in our Ed O'Keefe, who is covering Wisconsin's Supreme Court election. Ed, what is the turnout today, as best you can tell, either there in Milwaukee or statewide?
They're not anticipating much more than 2 million voters in this race by the end of today at the most. And if it exceeds that, then obviously this generated a lot more interest than both sides would have anticipated. It is a spring, odd-numbered year election. Wisconsin holds these for their Supreme Court justices and their state superintendent of schools and a few other local issues, but not expected to draw congressional, gubernatorial, certainly presidential numbers. And yet, the amount of money spent, 81 million plus at this point, you would have thought they were running the Senate seat that would tip the scale of power, or that this was a presidential election yet again, given that kind of spending and the advertising and digital targeting that's been going on.
And Ed, it's fascinating, that component you just mentioned, the money, but it's also worth evaluating that these races take on outsized importance because if, as the president is doing in Washington, you are shrinking things at the federal level and deferring things back to the states, entities like a state Supreme Court take on even more power.
They do, and not only on issues like abortion and whether labor unions can organize public workers in this state, and to some extent environmental policy, abortion and environment certainly being ones that the federal government is now trying to cede back to the states. But you're going to see potentially some challenges to the congressional map here ahead of next year, and you could see as many as 2 seats swing back to Democrats or become more competitive or just stay in the Republican column. And so there's obviously an appetite to try to influence this court and either maintain its ideological swing to the left right now if the Democratic-backed candidate wins, or swing it to the right ahead of making all these big decisions in a state that usually helps determine who wins the White House and can often help tip the balance of power in Congress.
And Ed, on this election day in Wisconsin, it's sort of come one, come all on social media. President Trump has weighed in on it yet again today. Get out the vote messaging. Also get out the vote messaging from Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and former Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and former President Barack Obama and others who have sort of been encouraged to find those supporters they may have who live in Wisconsin, or people who can call into Wisconsin and say, get out and vote. This is, for Democrats, a good early test run of how beleaguered the base really is. Can they see a contest like this on the calendar in this key state and realize they've got to go out and send a message to the president, to Elon Musk? It's notable that Judge Crawford, who's running as the liberal in this contest, the one backed by Democrats, in the last several days has made it very much about the fact that Elon Musk is spending so much money against her, telling supporters, look, I was born in Chippewa Falls, and if you would have told this young girl that the richest man in the world was going to be running against me, I wouldn't have understood why. And she still doesn't entirely, other than the obvious business interests he has and the political work he's doing on behalf of the president. And so she very much tried to make this a vote for me is a vote against that. Musk, Trump, and the influence they're trying to have across the country. Whereas Brad Schimmel, the conservative, turns around and says, you put me on the court, we're potentially a check on behalf of the president. So they nationalized it here, understanding that it was a way to motivate the base and potentially swing those independent voters, the very few thousand that there may be in this state, who either showed up today or would have voted in recent days.
Ed O'Keefe in Milwaukee for us. Thanks so very much. I want to turn now to our Olivia Rinaldi, who joins me here at the desk for the latest on the White House and tariffs. What do we know?
Well, tomorrow is Liberation Day, as Trump has been billing it, April 2nd, where he's going to announce...
That's what he calls it.
That's what he's calling it. It's the new slate of tariffs and reciprocal tariffs. Scant details on what, new details on who will be there tomorrow. We'll have steel workers and auto workers. This is reporting from our Jennifer Jacobs and Sarah Cook, but no CEOs in that event tomorrow. That is quite notable, I do think.
So the presentation will be, this is all about workers, reindustrialization of America, though CEOs have been on the phone with the president, and there's been lots of dialogue, not just with him directly, but with the Treasury Secretary, the Commerce Secretary, and others on the team about what these things actually will be, when they will kick in, and the magnitude.
Well, we're learning some small things. We do know from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, she said that these tariffs will go into effect immediately tomorrow. Whatever they are, they're going to go into effect. She also said Trump's phone, that line, still open. If you're a CEO and you want to call him, you want to...
Or if you're head of a country.
Absolutely. The term I've been playing with today and have been, following very closely is the dirty 15. You've been following CNBC, you've heard about it. That's not a 15% tariff, but the 15% of countries that make up the biggest trade deficit with the United States. It's about, $1 trillion. It's a lot of money.
And the dirty is a reference to what the Treasury Secretary has referred to as their unfair trade practices with the United States. That's what makes them so-called dirty.
Yes, that's what makes them dirty. And the dirty little secret of it is that most of them are allies of the United States. So think the European Union, Canada, Mexico,
Sweden's on that list.
Sweden's on that list. All of these countries, Japan's on that list.
We have good relationships with Vietnam and Thailand.
Of course. Yeah, we have wonderful relationships with them. But tomorrow, that might change. And it's certainly going to be reflected somewhat in the stock market. The White House says they know that. They're certainly thinking about that, even though they want to pretend that they're not. Caroline Leavitt said today there are legitimate concerns about how the stock market will react. But she said they are doing this for the next generation and the generation after that to increase American production here at home. That's what they're banking on.
You said you didn't have very many details? That's not true. You have plenty of details. Olivia Rinaldi, thanks so very much. Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now from Capitol Hill. So, Caitlin, ordinarily we would not start our conversation saying, oh, there was a procedural vote in the House that went down, because most of our audience doesn't know how important or ever important a procedural vote is. But today is different. It actually is important because it's reflective of something the House leadership wanted on the Republican side and some defection within Republican ranks. Take it away.
Yeah, Major, this was supposed to be a very big week for House Republicans up here on Capitol Hill. They were touting two key pieces of legislation that they wanted to pass through the House. They actually were sent home today by the House Speaker, and here's why. The House Speaker and House Republican leadership suffered a big defeat on a procedural rule, and I'll explain kind of what it is and how we got here. Essentially, there has been a group of mothers up here on Capitol Hill who have been trying to make the argument that those who have just given birth should be able to vote by proxy in the early weeks after giving birth to be able to care for their infant at home and not have to travel all those miles here to Washington, D.C. to cast their vote. It's a way for them to, be a new parent and also to be a member of Congress at the same time and serve their constituents. This is called proxy voting. Anna Paulina Luna, who is a very conservative Republican member of the House, brought up what's called a discharge petition, which means bringing up a piece of legislation that doesn't need to go through committee. You just need 218 signatures to bring it to the House floor. That measure would be to institute proxy voting for new mothers. House leadership, however, has been adamantly against this. House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that he's concerned that it would open the floodgates, in his words, to proxy voting of all kinds and kind of take away the Congress meeting part of Congress. He also argues that it's unconstitutional. Now, you may remember that Congress did use proxy voting during the pandemic not too long ago. So there are questions of, well, was it unconstitutional then? The House Speaker has wanted to get rid of that, and he has, and he's very adamant that it not happen again. But what happened today was, in order to try to stop this petition from Representative Luna and some others, he tried, and House leadership tried, to insert a rule in a different piece of legislation that essentially said anything related to proxy voting can never come up. And so in order to move forward on any legislation, they had to first vote on that rule. And in a really stunning defeat for House Republican leaders, that rule didn't pass. You had 11 Republicans vote against it, which means that this proxy vote could come up for a vote at some point in the near future. Now, the House Speaker sent everybody home today. No more votes for the rest of the week. And they'll reconvene next week, and they'll try to do this all over again.
And Caitlin, that's an excellent description of what happened and its implications. I thank you for that. Let's talk about Cory Booker. He's still talking and getting some attention for at least the physicality of it all, the rhetorical nature of it, and what is he trying to get across?
That's right. Well, if you've been watching C-SPAN, which, you know, you may, no judgment, for the past 22-ish hours, you will have noticed that Cory Booker has been on the floor for all of that time. He is essentially waging not quite a filibuster, because he's not filibustering actual legislation, but he's been standing on the floor for over 21 hours now to, in his words, protest the Trump administration. Now, is this going to change anything? Is Donald Trump all of a sudden going to say, oh, Cory Booker speaking on the Senate floor, I'm going to change my ways? No. But this is an appeal to the base of the Democratic Party, which, as you know, has been really, upset with lawmakers up here on Capitol Hill arguing that they're not doing enough, in their view, to fight back against this administration. Democrats have very little leverage up here. They're in the minority. They can't really do much legislatively. They can delay things here and there. But what they're really trying to focus on now is messaging to their constituents. And Cory Booker's way is to say, look, I'm quite literally standing up for you for hours and hours. Just one quick fun fact, if he goes a little past 7 today, he will break the record that had been set by Strom Thurmond for a 24-hour speech.
Caitlin, Huey-Burns, and on that Strom Thurmond thing, that was a full filibuster. This is merely a talkathon.
Yes.
They're different, but in the current dissection of what's going on Capitol Hill and whether or not Democrats are doing enough or not, this is something that at least Cory Booker can point to and say, well, I tried this. How about that? Caitlin Huey-Burns, thanks so much.